So for this quiz, question number 1, they're asking about this graph, and this radio signal's characteristics are illustrated by the function graph below. Which statement about the function is true? And looking at the different possible answers, the only answer that would actually make sense is the inverse relation of the function is not a function. And that is, when you're looking at an inverse relation, you're looking at it, you would actually take this graph and almost turn it on its side, which would not be a function. But if you look at the other possible answers, like for example, the range of the function is a set of all real numbers. That's not true. The range of the function is actually between -1 and 1, because remember, the range is what comes out. The domain is what is put in. And then it says the range of the function is a set of all numbers on the interval -6 and 6. And again, that's not true. We said the range is between 1 and -1. And then it says the domain of the function is a set of all real numbers on the interval -1 and 1. And that's actually the range. So that is why the only answer could be the first one. The inverse relation of the function is not a function. Okay, for question 5, it says from the graph below, the point 4, 6 represents A or N. And if you notice, 4, 6 is right here at the very top of the parabola, so that means it is the absolute maximum. For question number 6, it says if f and g represents the functions, then f of g, or the composite function, what does that mean? And then the correct answer is f of g of x, and that is actually, by definition, that is what a composite function is. Now this one is a little trickier, but it kind of corresponds to the question before. So question 7, f and g represent functions and their independent and dependent variable values are shown in the table below, then find f of g of 4. So actually the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find g of 4. Now g, here's the 4 that would go in, and then what comes out is 7 for g of x. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that answer and put it back in for the f of x. So here's our 7, and then it comes out f of x as 4. For question number 8, it says if the inverse f -1 of x is the inverse of f of x, then the graphs of f -1 of x and f of x will be mirror images reflected across the line, and the answer is y equals x, and that is by definition of an inverse. The lines are mirror images reflected across the y equals x. For this question number 9, it says the floor function is y equals the absolute value of x, with each y value defined as the greatest integer not greater than its corresponding x value. Respond to each part in 1 or 2 succinct, direct, well-developed sentences. So first of all, they talk about the range of the floor function. Now the range is what happens in the y, and the range here is going to be everything positive, because remember, when it comes out of an absolute value sign, it has to be positive. When it says describe the graph of the floor function, then that's actually going to be a v. If you look at an absolute value, y equals the absolute value of x, and if you just Google that graph, it looks like a v. Or you could have used it in Desmos. You could put it in Desmos, and then you can describe the function of it. And it says determine the value for y when x equals -2.5, and the value for y, you would put -2.5 in for x, and the value actually would be +2.5, and that is because when it comes out of the absolute value sign, it's going to be positive. To explain your reasoning is by definition of absolute value. And finally, this last question, you're going to talk a little bit about this graph and the behaviors of the graph, the intervals of its increasing or decreasing, or where it's remaining constant. So you're going to look at this graph, and if you notice from -2, -4 to 3, 6, that is increasing. By the way, we read graphs from left to right, so that is the increasing part of the graph. Now, everything to the right of this, so everything from -3, 6 on, and then everything from, I would call it actually negative infinity to -2, -4, those are constant part of the graphs. Now, there is only one 0 in the graph, and that is actually at the origin for 0, 0. So this graph is increasing along that portion, it is remaining the same along the other portions, and there is one 0 in the graph.